Good afternoon and happy Friday. I hope everybody drank their Brondo. It's the thirst mutilator and it has electrolytes. Well, we made it through another week. I've got a lot I could say today, but I just don't see the point in it. I'm tired. My wife will be home from work soon and I don't have a lot of energy, but I just, I thought it was kind of funny with um, the announcement that Trump apparently thinks that Russia is going to keep Ukraine. Well, on one hand, I see the Trump haters are coming out saying he's letting Putin win. But on the other hand, the time to do something about Russia being in Ukraine was in 2014 when they took it over. Um, I had an interesting discussion with a friend of mine, and he said that we essentially started this conflict by meddling with the Ukrainian elections. I believe they they had a guy named Yankojevic or something like that, and we and he was pro-Russian, and we sort of used our muscle to help them elect. I think his name is Poroshenko. This is before Vladimir Zelensky came into the picture, but we kind of instigated this a little bit, not a lot, a little bit, but George W. Bush or George H. Bush saying that NATO wouldn't go east of the German-Polish border, and now Russia feels surrounded. Sometimes when you to defeat an adversary or at least keep abreast of them, you have to understand why they feel as they do. So you have to kind of look at things from Vladimir Putin's standpoint. Um, he feels as though he's being encircled, and he's justifiably upset about it. That doesn't say he's a good guy or anything like that, but nevertheless, um, there's some reporters asking Trump about how he's going to fix this, and he said, "Well, I need a week before I can answer it. I'm going to see if I can make a deal." He's still optimistic that there's going to be some sort of peace, but Russia has been entrenched in Ukraine for 11 years. Um, I think people were hoping that Vladimir Putin would say, "I am a bad guy. I'm going to get out of Ukraine. I'm going to go back to Russia." Well, there are millions of ethnic Russians who live in what is part of Ukraine, and Ukraine also used to be part of the Soviet Union. So you've got that whole dynamic going on. And I don't really know what the full story is, but there's definitely some hanky panky involving the Biden administration with Burisma and Hunter Biden and the firing of one of the Ukrainian prosecutors who was going to look into this. And then money was withheld. There's a whole lot of weird stuff going on. And, it goes beyond Donald Trump, but he kind of got handed this mess. Is he going to be able to develop a peace agreement of some kind? I don't know. I just, being a former military officer and looking at this logically, I don't see there's an avenue of Russia totally pulling out of Ukraine. Are they going to give up part of it? Maybe. I don't know. Russia has always wanted a warm water port because they can launch ships up at St. Petersburg or Murmansk, but they're frozen in a lot. They do have Kaliningrad, but that's sort of an oblast. It's between Poland and Lithuania. That's like an oblast that is kind of like it's an easement sort of thing. It's detached from Russia proper, but it was I think originally the Germans controlled it, but now it's called Kaliningrad. It's right on the Baltic Sea, and I believe that's frost free for almost all the year. But they would love to have a warm water port for access to the Black Sea and then eventually the Mediterranean Sea and of course the Atlantic Ocean. Um, so that's in the strategic interest of Russia. I, I don't know how this is going to end. I don't see Russia is easily willing to give that up. Are they going to give up? What do they call it? I think it's called the Donetsk or something like that. I don't have my map in front of me, but there's other places, or was it near the border where Kursk is? there are other options that they have. With the Eastern nations, it's very important. Saving face is very strong. Um, what can be done for this to guarantee peace in the region? Well, obviously, Ukraine's not going to become part of NATO. I just don't see that as being something that Russia is going to accept. Can they actually have Ukraine be a sovereign nation and trade with Russia? I don't know. It can probably happen. But things get pretty nasty when two Slavic countries go to war with each other. Um, there's a lot they're not telling us. There's a lot that's classified, and I understand that. That's acceptable. But this whole situation of like Russia is 100% bad and Ukraine is 100% good is not really, that's not really true. And if you want to have a lasting peace, you have to find some way of making a deal or some kind of compromise where both sides feel as though they gain something. Um, you're going to have a diplomatic solution ahead of a military solution. But what they're doing now is you have a lot of Russians and a lot of Ukrainians dying. And if it's simply a war of attrition, Russia's going to win that because they have a strong will to inflict casualties on their enemy, and they have a severe willingness to inflict casualties on their own side, or I should say, to sustain casualties on their own side. They've got like 1,000 years of history of being willing to fight pretty hard. Whether they're right or wrong, they do fight. Um, you know, this is not going to end where it's going to please everybody. Maybe there's three ways it can end. Number one, Putin can decide, okay, I'm just going to go back, totally vacate Ukraine. That's probably not going to happen. Number two is Russia will cease hostilities. Ukraine will be restored, except for the area around the Crimea, which Russia has already occupied for 11 years, and they've already Russified the area. They're going to keep that. That's not going to sit well with some people, but it's better than having them control half of Eastern Europe like they used to. Um, a third option is the most unpleasant, and that's World War III. Do we really, you don't want to throw Ukraine under the bus, but is it worth having World War III started when we've got problems with China and Taiwan or Formosa, and we've got problems with the Israelis and the Palestinian Arabs and the Iranians in the Middle East? Do we really want three things going off at once? Um, I should think not. There's got to be a way of coming up with some kind of deal where both parties sit down, maybe sit down in Switzerland or some other even Turkey, even though Turkey's part of NATO, they're on good terms with Victor, what's his name, Erdogan and Vladimir Putin are under fairly good terms with each other. Even Viktor Orban in Hungary, he seems to be cordial with Donald Trump, and he's also cordial with Vladimir Putin. So maybe they could sit down in a neutral country like that. I still believe a diplomatic solution can be achieved. The important thing is you have to convince people that they have something to gain economically from it. Because when two countries trade with each other, they're less likely to bomb their customers. Um, you know, we buy a lot of cars from Toyota in Japan, as well as Nissan, Honda, Mitsubishi, and whatnot. And the Japanese buy things from us. But, we are their customers. They're less likely to drop bombs on us. It used to be true that two different nations that had a McDonald's franchise didn't go to war with each other. I don't think that's true anymore, but that used to be the case when I was growing up. Um, Economic trade is much better than warfare. When goods and services cross borders, soldiers are less likely to do that. So I'm hoping that they can come up with some kind of agreement, and it would be awesome to see this conflict ended, and very, very soon. because, deep down, the Russians and Ukrainians are like brothers. Um, I lived in Germany for a couple of years, and there were Russians and Ukrainians who lived in our city, and they seemed to get along okay with each other outside of their own territory. I think it's the same with, some of the people from the old Baltic states. But nevertheless, I'm going off on a tangent. I just wanted to throw that out there. And another thing going on is that case of Mr. Garcia, who's back home in El Salvador. Um, he was under deportation order. Some people are saying he didn't receive due process, and you can make that argument all you want, but he didn't use due process to enter the country. And now people are worried about him being entitled to due process on his way out. Well, if he's in El Salvador, he is home. He's not a Maryland man. He's home in El Salvador. And if he's wanted for crimes there related to a gang or whatnot, it's up to his government and his judicial system to handle that, not ours. That's just my 2 cents on it. Um, there's a lot that you're not going to learn from watching CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or Breitbart or any of the other networks out there that are left, right, or center. Um, Sometimes as an American, it's better to look at foreign news sources. You'll get like DW.com is from Germany. They have an English language translation on their website. The articles are actually written in English to begin with, so the translation doesn't look garbled. Um, uh, Sky News from Australia is another good one. The BBC. Even from time to time, Al Jazeera has some pretty good stuff. And dare I say it, haven't looked at them in a while, but Russia Today, RT News. They had some interesting stories and a different way of looking at something. It doesn't mean you take it as gospel, but it's nice to sometimes see another person's perspective. Even if you disagree with somebody, you can kind of say, okay, why are they coming from this? Rather than just shout pejoratives at them and say, you're a Nazi or whatever. No, don't do that. Find out if they're wrong, but at least you can understand why they feel the way they do. So that's about all I have. I just wish everybody has a very good weekend. And, if you're a religious person, pray for peace. Got nothing to lose by doing that. Um, if you're not a religious person, send kind thoughts and good vibes. Um, have a seance, not a seance. What do you call it? I don't even know what you call it, but light some incense in honor of the young lives being lost in Ukraine and Russia on both sides, and it's unnecessary. You know, the war is brutal. Even if your side is in the right, it's brutal, and you should try and avoid it unless you absolutely can't. If you're attacked, okay, you got to fight like you can, like fight like hell. But anyway, we live in some very crazy times. The stock market is like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I'm not even going to delve into that one. All I can say is dollar cost averaging. If you put a certain percentage of your paycheck aside every week, just keep doing it. And I believe in life cycle funds. Use the 2030 fund all the way to a 2065 fund. The 2065 will have an elevated, higher risk, more speculative. A 2030 fund will be like mostly, safe, low yield securities and things like that. But you can ride these things out. The economy goes up and down. It doesn't matter whether there's a Democrat or a Republican in the White House. Wall Street is going to do what it's going to do. And I know it's easy for some demagoguing politicians to say, we care more about Main Street than Wall Street. Well, yeah, but most everybody has a 401k or some kind of retirement plan at work. Whether they really know it or not, they're in the stock market. So, the only way to get rich quick, unless you're a corrupt politician, the only way to get rich quick is 40 years of hard work and prudent investing. So anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. But I hope everybody has a good day. And I'm sorry I'm sounding a little groggy. I don't know if it's allergies. The pollen is really crazy here right now, but I don't know what it is. I'm not feeling 100%. I'm not firing on 8 cylinders, but it is what it is. Peace, everybody.